Hello and welcome back to another week and another Federalist paper. This week we're doing Federalist number 13. It's a discussion of economics and how the Union actually supports the economy and what breaking up the Union would do to absolutely decimate the economies of our original 13 states. So it's a really exciting paper. I love economics. I love talking about it and studying it. So this one is right up my alley. I'm really excited to jump into it. Federalist number 13 is called Advantage of the Union in Respect to Economy and Government. It was written by none other than Alexander Hamilton. We're going to see mostly Hamilton from here on out for a while because, as we all know, he wrote most of these. He published this November 28th, 1787, so just a day after last week's paper, number 12. So as usual, I will have a little P1, P2 symbol here in the corner. So if you are reading along with me and you want to follow along in the paper, then you can keep up right there. If you don't have a text, you can go to the Amazon link. You can buy a copy, a hard copy. That's what I like to read out of because I'm old school like that. And you can follow along in that, but if you prefer free, that's totally a-okay. And you can go to the Library of Congress website, which I've also linked below, and they have the full text of all the Federalist papers online there, so you can follow along there. And with that being said, let's just get right into it. So we start this paper off with a very basic economic concept. He says, the money saved from one object may be usefully applied to another. So obviously, if we don't have to spend money on something, in this case, he's going to talk about government employees and people that the government pay, then we can apply that money elsewhere or we can save that money. And there will be so much the less to be drawn from the pockets of the people. If the states are united under one government, there will be but one national civil list to support. And a national civil list is a list of individuals that the government pays money to, whether that's pensions, salary, stuff like that. If they're divided into several confederacies, there will be as many different national civil lists to be provided for. So that's really the central idea of what he's presenting as he starts this paper, which is just the sheer number of people it's going to take to manage the different states separately would be unnecessarily useless when we can manage it all under one government more efficiently, and that is to the benefit of the people because obviously it costs more money to run a more complicated government or to run a more complicated series of governments with different confederacies, which is actually what he talks about next, which is how these confederacies are likely to group up, how they're likely to league together. So you've got the 4 in the north, another 4 in the middle, and then a third of the 5 southern states. And the reason that he specifies exactly how he believes that the states are going to split up is because according to this distribution, each confederacy would comprise an extent of territory larger than that of the Kingdom of Britain. Because the varying confederacies, the different confederacies would also be quite large, you're not gaining any benefit by splitting up the government entity in that sense, at least not in economic terms. No well-informed man will suppose that the affairs of such a confederacy can be properly regulated by a government less comprehensive in its organs or institutions than that which has been proposed by the convention. So there's no simpler way to govern than what is already talked about at the convention, meaning that instead of having one central government for all 13 colonies, now you'd have to have at least 3 if it's 3 different confederacies. And each section or each confederacy would have to have an equally complex government. This idea admits not of precise demonstration because there is no rule by which we can measure the momentum of civil power necessary to the government of any given number of individuals. So there's no quantifying it. There's no specific calculus to figure out exactly how large a government needs to be given a population. There's so many different variables that would go into that anyways. But when we consider that the island of Britain, nearly commensurate with that of the supposed confederacies, contains about 8 millions of people, and when we reflect upon the degree of authority required to direct the passions of so large a society to the public good, we shall see no reason to doubt that the like portion of power would be sufficient to perform the same task in a society far more numerous. So you can use the same sized government for a smaller economy as you would for a larger economy when you're talking about countries that are the size of Britain and greater, is what the argument is that he's making here. So civil power, properly organized and exerted, is capable of diffusing its force to a very great extent, and can, in a manner, reproduce itself in every part of a great empire by a judicious arrangement of subordinate institutions. So it's basically just a levels system. You have institutions that are on a more local level that report to the institutions on a county-wide level, state level, national level. So in this way, everybody works together, and then hopefully we can get the most efficient use of our public resources that we can. So in this next part of the paper, he goes into more in depth about which states are likely to align with each other, why they would do that, just their geographical positioning and their economies, and who the different states, how they interact with them. But he makes some especially interesting observations about Pennsylvania, so that's what I want to dig into next. He says even Pennsylvania would have strong inducements to join the Northern League. And so here we have a map so that we can see exactly where Pennsylvania is located and maybe get an idea of why Hamilton really chose to focus in on this one particular state in terms of just its geographical positioning. So Pennsylvania is located right here, right in between New York and the southern states. Hamilton says they may prefer a system which would give unlimited scope to all nations to be the carriers as well as the purchasers of their commodities. And here he's referring to the southern states. Pennsylvania may not choose to confound her interests in a connection so adverse to her policy. So the connections that they have with the North are just more in line with what the people who live there feel. As she must, at all events, be a frontier, meaning she is the border between two sovereign nations if they are to split up and if they are to join into different confederacies, she may deem it most consistent with her safety to have her exposed side turned towards the weaker power of the Southern rather than towards the stronger power of the Northern Confederacy. So what he means is that either this side is going to be exposed or this side is going to be exposed. Considering that this Northern Confederacy is much stronger than this Southern Confederacy here, it would be much preferred to have an exposed side against the Southern Confederacy. They feel that they would be better able to defend themselves should there be any conflict with their exposed side of the state. This would give her the fairest chance to avoid being the Flanders of America. So I had to do a little bit of digging on Flanders. I had no idea what it was. And so I'm happy that I was able to read this paper and get some more information about this little situation that happened. So what I found on Wikipedia about Flanders and its history and how their history might relate to this paper and what Hamilton means to bring them into the conversation. Flanders lost its former economic and intellectual power under Spanish, Austrian, and French rule. Heavy taxation and rigid imperial political control compounded the effects of industrial stagnation and Spanish-Dutch and Franco-Austrian conflict. The southern Netherlands suffered severely under the War of the Spanish Succession. So in the midst of all of this fighting around them and all of this conflict around them, they ended up getting divided, and the once prosperous economic prosperity that they enjoyed was absolutely decimated by the conflicts happening around them. Now, the War of the Spanish Succession, the reason that I want to give a little bit of background on what this was is because I think this is what he is referring to and what he is comparing Pennsylvania to. Because when the Spanish Succession happened, it had started because the Charles II of Spain died without an heir, without a successor, and so quite a bit of conflict came up over that. Wikipedia says that it established the principle that dynastic rights were secondary to maintaining the balance of power between different countries. So that's what it brought up. And then he says British involvement was driven by safeguarding their trade routes in the Mediterranean, while by putting Archduke Charles on the Spanish throne, they hoped to gain commercial privileges within the Spanish Empire. The Habsburgs viewed northern Italy and suppressing the Hungarian revolt as high priorities, while after 1704, the Dutch focused on Flanders. So Flanders just became caught up in the conflict of the stronger states around it. So Pennsylvania, absolutely, given their geographical location between the southern states and the northern states, would do everything in their power and their interest to avoid being caught up in a situation that Flanders was caught up in. Whatever may be the determination of Pennsylvania, if the Northern Confederacy includes New Jersey, there is no likelihood of more than one confederacy to the south of that state. So he's just explaining why there is likely to be a division of two separate governments and why it would absolutely make sense for those central states to league with the northern states, and the southern states, due to their varying interests, are likely to league together down in the south. Then he says, nothing can be more evident than that the 13 states will be able to support a national government better than 1/2 or 1/3 or any number less than the whole. This reflection must have great weight in obviating that objection to the proposed plan, which is founded on the principle of expense. An objection, however, which, when we come to take a nearer view of it, will appear in every light to stand on mistaken ground. So there is no greater economic benefit to splitting up the government. The most efficient way to do it is as one government, and it's going to be more efficient that way than any fraction of the whole could be on its own. To finish up the paper, he says, if in addition to the consideration of a plurality of civil lists, so all of these extra people that the government will be responsible to pay for, we take into account the number of persons who must necessarily be employed to guard the inland communication between the different confederacies against illicit trade, and who in time will infallibly spring up out of the necessities of revenue. So not only is there going to be redundancy in the different governments of people who have to perform the same task that could be more efficiently performed over the whole of the Union, but then you're going to have to employ additional people to ensure that no illegal activity is happening across these new country lines, and that it adds even more to the expense. And if we also take into view the military establishments, which it has been shown would unavoidably result from the jealousies and conflicts of the several nations into which the states would be divided. So we've already discussed up to this point in previous papers how the varying states would naturally devolve into conflict at some point. It would be absolutely unavoidable, which means that now there's additional military expense for each confederacy as well. We shall clearly discover that a separation would be not less injurious to the economy than to the tranquility, commerce, revenue, and liberty of every part. So it would have a negative impact not only on the economy, but also on every other standard of living for every single one of the populace. It just wouldn't serve any single citizen, which is who the government is supposed to support. So if we have the citizenry's best interests at heart, and we are really setting up a government that is supposed to support liberty and freedom for the people, splitting up is not the way to do it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I am so happy to be back at it and regularly posting again. I'm excited to get into these papers. So please feel free to leave your thoughts and comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. I'd love to hear if there's any deeper analysis that you did on this paper, or if maybe there's a part of the paper that I didn't address that you would like me to go into. So definitely leave me a comment. If you enjoyed the video, like it. It helps other people to find my videos so that it pops up for them in their little search bars when they're searching for this. Because like I always say, the reason that I started doing this was because I just couldn't find any resources on my own of people walking through these papers one at a time. So we are all learning together. This is a group effort. So definitely let me know if you've got anything else to add to the conversation. That's why I'm here. That's why we're doing this. If you are interested in following me on my other social medias, I will leave a link to my Instagram and my Twitter below. I would definitely love to hear from you. Subscribe if you're looking forward to the next 72 Federalist papers, perhaps anti-Federalist papers after that. Who knows? I've been getting a lot of comments about it, so I might jump into that at some point, just not quite sure when, because it's a lot of planning and a lot of effort that go into these. So I want to make sure that what I bring to you guys is really quality and something that you really would get a lot of value out of, and that I would get value out of making as well. So with that, I'm excited to see you guys in the next one, and I'll see you later. Bye.